Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the joint meeting of Senate Finance and Assembly Ways and Means. We have 3 budgets to hear before us today. The meeting has been duly posted. Folks are now well aware of how they can participate in our meetings. So with that, if I could have the committee secretary please call the roll. Thank you.
Senator Brooks.
Here.
Senator Cannizzaro.
Here.
Senator Dennis.
Here.
Senator Dondero Loop.
Here.
Senator Gokachia.
Here.
Senator Hammond.
Here.
Senator Kiekefer.
Here.
Senator Ratty.
Here.
Senator Severs Gansert.
Here.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson. Assemblyman Frierson.
Here.
Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Here.
Assemblyman Hafen.
Here.
Assemblywoman Howdigi.
Here.
Assemblyman Levitt.
Here.
Assemblywoman Miller.
Here.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Here.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Here.
Assemblyman Roberts.
Here.
Assemblywoman Titus.
Here.
Assemblywoman Tolles.
Here.
Assemblyman Watts.
Here.
And Chair Carlton.
And I am here, if you would please mark the majority leader absent excused. We can go ahead and begin this morning. Our first budget that we have is the Nevada Athletic Commission. If we could go ahead and queue up the appropriate presenter on the Athletic Commission, please.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, this is Jeff Mullen, Chief Assistant of the Nevada State Athletic Commission. We regret that Executive Director Bob Bennett could not attend the meeting this morning. Sitting in with me in the meeting is Management Assistant to Frankie Mason. Thank you for the opportunity to present this morning. We know your time is extremely valuable and we'll do our best to be succinct. We're here to provide a quick overview of who we are. The Athletic Commission may imply a wide area of oversight in sporting events. We often field calls from the public requesting info on everything from basketball to bare-knuckle boxing. However, as our mission statement notes, the agency is responsible for regulating unarmed combat sports only. This includes boxing, mixed martial arts, and kickboxing. We regulate all contests, tests, and exhibition of unarmed combat in the state of Nevada, including licensure and supervision of all licensees. In FY19, the agency moved from under Business and Industry Division to the Office of the Governor. Our board is made up of 5 members who are appointed by the governor. The leadership, business acumen, dedication, and commitment of the board is and has been a driving force in ensuring that we perform at the highest caliber and are leading the way in fulfilling our mission statement. Las Vegas is the perfect platform for these events, which generate state revenue, and our primary goal is to regulate the sports fairly with a strong health and safety oversight. The Nevada Legislature set us in motion in 1941, and we continue that work today. The conduct and regulation of unarmed combat in Nevada are governed by NRS Chapter 467 and are further clarified by the regulations of the Commission, Chapter 467 of the Nevada Administrative Code. We work closely with our assigned Deputy Attorney Generals when required. Review sessions are imperative as the sport changes for health and safety reasons. our new technology comes into play. Athletic Commission has been self-funded since July of 2015. The close of FY20 marks a 5-year period under the self-funded model. The agency has maintained financial stability and the healthy operating reserve during this period. We manage one budget within the agency, 3952, and the two largest expenditures are Cat 1 personnel and Cat 4 operations. Category 1 personnel, this expenditure line increased due to moving from 5 full-time employees to a fully staffed agency with 8 full-time employees. Additionally, there are overtime costs tied to the events. Overtime costs did spike during the pandemic due to quarantine and testing rules. For the health and safety of everyone participating, it was a mandatory expense. Category 4, operations. The primary cost increase under this category over the 5-year fiscal period is due to the rent increase after moving to our current location in FY17 while under B&I. Fees are collected under NRS 467-107 and NRS 467-108. Promoters must submit event numbers to the commission within 10 days of completion of each event. This includes the number of venue house seats, tickets sold, gross ticket sales, fee comps, face value of fee comps. Once received, a club report is created by agency staff calculating the total fees owing and then sent back to the promoter for sign-off and payment. Fees are broken down into 3 categories: gate, comp tickets, and NRS 467-108 for the amateur program. 8% of the total gross receipt of admission fees, the gate fee, is collected from the promoter. Comp ticket fees are calculated by category and entered into a formula sheet approved by the AGO office to compute the amount owing. The state receives 6% of all gate and comp ticket fees. The Athletic Commission receives 2% of the gate and comp ticket fees. The funds calculated per NRS 467-108 are held at the agency level management and distribution. This slide shows 2% gate and the correlating number of professional events for the past 5 fiscal years. You can see there is not always a direct correlation between an increase in the number of events and the increase in gate fees collected. It depends on the size of the venue, the star power of the fight card, specifically the main event, and to some degree the undercard. Fiscal year 2018 was a bit of an anomaly as Las Vegas hosted the second largest grossing gate boxing event, Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor at the T-Mobile Arena, with co-promoters Mayweather Promoters, Zuffa, and TGB, with gross sales of $55,414,865.79. We expect to close out FY21 with most, if not all, of the events falling under the pandemic protocol closed system, also known as the bubble, meaning no live audiences or ticket sales, equating to no collection of gate fees. On March 14, 2020, the Commission canceled all previously approved event date permit requests that had been scheduled. The Commission worked with our doctors, both internal and external, as well as scientists, to develop a set of pandemic protocols. With approval from the governor, the Nevada Athletic Commission held its first closed system event under the approved pandemic protocols on May 30th, 2020. We have continued to improve on best practices during the pandemic and adjusted protocols based on the governor's directives. Any individual found in violation were immediately removed from events. During the pandemic closure period, we have held 12 events, 5 mixed, and during FY 2020, that was 5 mixed martial arts events and 7 boxing. And during FY 2021, we've held 49 events, 30 mixed martial arts and 19 boxing. Under NRS 467-107, Section 9, a service fee was approved for these no admission fee events. License fees, event permit fees, and fines are still collected by the Nevada State Athletic Commission on behalf of the state for the no admission fees. With the decrease in new COVID-19 cases and the rise in vaccination, we expect to revert to the live event model, although it's lower admission numbers, by early FY 2022. The slide breaks out FY 2022, FY 23 resources as the governor recommends. Again, the balance forward shows we have a strong reserve. Regarding the amateur surcharge, although we did not collect any revenue because there were no live games, we also did not expend any of the funds due to the governor's emergency directive and the ban on youth sports, specifically the contact sports such as boxing. These are the FY 22, FY 23 expenditures the governor recommends. Our apologies for the small print, may be a bit hard to read. The large green area is CAT 85 operating reserve. CAT 86 amateur program reserve is also shown. E225 budget enhancement request seeks approval for recruitment of an administrative aide 3 position with a starting salary at step 1 grade 27 of $36,790 plus applicable benefits for the current approved Nevada state pay grades. We intend to increase staff by 1 administrative assistant 3 position. Although the current spike in events may indicate the need for another staff member, this is not the driving factor behind the request. The increase in Nevada events is due to COVID-19. The no audience pandemic protocol mandates staff quarantine for specific timeframes prior to each event. This means we are down staff in the office as well. Currently, staff are struggling to schedule vacation leave, and any type of absence at this point would have a major impact due to the workload. Although we cannot predict how long the current situation will continue, we do not expect to revert to our normal protocols with large live audience with ticket sales at pre-COVID for the balance of FY 21. Rather, the quest is part of the agency's long-term strategic succession plan. The value of the position may have immediate impact on profitability. However, it will help the agency sustain the current business model of being able to regulate multiple events the same day with our highly trained staff. As of today, 75% of our staff are eligible for retirement. Another 20% in under 5 years, that would be 95% of our staff. Part-time position and or contract position options were considered. While this option would solve some assistance with non-event related backlog, it would not have an immediate impact on overtime reduction nor provide a long-term resolution to the pending staff turnover. The agency has operated with lean, efficient workforce for years. While being woefully understaffed, the priorities were event, mandatory reporting, and the recording of incoming funds. We have utilized temporary contract workers in the past to tackle a backlog of non-specialized event tasks as filing and scanning. All other non-event tasks were deferred. We're still getting up to date with some of that backlog now that we are fully staffed. Health and safety programs were deferred, revision and in-depth review of policies as well. With the increase in staff, it has allowed us to break away from the sole focus of putting on events and invest in strategic planning and look forward to, for our succession planning and agency reviewing current policies, revamping, modernizing our systems, full-scale staff cross-training. We have also initiated training programs for officials, which has a direct link to the health and safety, specifically for the referees and the reviewing officials. We've also completed a glove weight study, also linked to the health and safety of the fighters. Staff deferred vacations in order to run events. Our 3 longest serving staff members have combined agency tenure and industry knowledge of 75 years. We are seeking to attract and retain staff for the long term due to the specialized industry knowledge of combat sports, including industry, event, regulation, and medical requirements, specifically imperative due to the health and safety aspect. This requires an investment of time. This slide shows the current org chart as well as the proposed position in orange. Because our staff is so small, everyone is cross-trained in at least one other area of critical task. We currently have 3 staff members who have handled the administrative side on site at events, working the table, that's collection of scores, reporting, et cetera, and 1 staff member who's primary medical clearance personnel who stays in the office. Events had to be turned down during the pandemic, as 3 events per week or even on the same night put us in a precarious and vulnerable staffing situation. We often run 2 events in one night and have 1 backup person to cover that is fully trained. The proposed position would fall under the MA2 and split duties between administrative tasks while being trained on event support and ultimately event coverage. If the position is approved, we would look to staffing toward the end of FY22, allowing us to focus on full launch and staff training of new modernization system. Budget enhancement request E226, instant replay technology. The Nevada State Athletic Commission is the first state ever to attempt utilization of instant replay.
If I could go ahead and stop you for a second, let's go ahead and do 225 and then we'll move on to 226 if that's okay.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. No, that's fine. Sorry, there's a little bit of a delay. I meant to catch you earlier. So with that, committee members, I'd like to go ahead and open it up for questions on 225. So Senator Brooks, I believe you had a question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair Carlton. Mine is really around your reserves. And I know, Mr. Mullen, that it's a strange time for a business that like athletic events, but traditionally your office has had relatively high reserves compared to the type of agency that you have. And I just wanted to understand what you feel your optimum reserve level is. And is there a plan, or are you working towards considering any measures to align your revenues with your expenditures? Because right now it seems like you have quite a bit of reserves, and if you could address that.
I am going to defer to Management Analyst 2, Frankie Mason, on this, please.
Good morning, Chair Carlton and members of the committee. Yes, absolutely, we are an anomaly, and specifically during this pandemic period. The one factor about our business is that when we do projections, it's based on 5-year averages, but we don't control the business that comes into the state. We approve it. So having a healthy reserve is imperative to our agency, because at any time the promoters can get a better deal at a different venue, at a different state, and we can lose the lion's share of our income. So our operating expenditures, as noted in the presentation, stay pretty consistent. Even with the increase of staff, we're very fiscally responsible on how we use our materials, and again, try to do the strategic planning. So in our operating reserves, although we've been healthy, I know when we were under B&I, they tended to be around the 1.2, 1.3 million mark. But ultimately, our goal is to not put ourselves in a vulnerable position if we were to have a year with no events or not high-level events, such as the anomaly in 2018 with McGregor and Mayweather. That even making budget projections on that is going to skew it too high. So we always like to come in conservative. But to answer your question, I really 1.4, 1.6 in reserve, I think it keeps a level of safety to go through a biennium period versus one annual period. So, and our expenditures, our biggest expenditure that we are constantly watching, of course, is our overtime. And this was a different year, again, where the quarantine mandated the number of overtime hours. So that would be our expectation going forward. And again, our expenditures do not normally vacillate too much. And I hope I've answered your question. If I haven't, please present any other clarification points that you might like.
Thank you. I appreciate that justification for the reserves. And I have another question about the reserves. If the events with live attendance become permissible or bigger capacity is available, and these things are changing constantly based on the pandemic, how do you think that'll impact the agency's ability to generate revenue, and ultimately, what will that do to your reserves?
That is actually a very good question, and why we're actually happy to have a little bit healthier reserve, because you kind of hit the nail on the head. As you see, we move forward to opening up events. They are at a limited number, taking the Allegiant Stadium when you're going from 10,000 down to 2,000 people. So in our case, our venues are quite a bit smaller than that. So if we are opening up at a limited capacity, at this point, we cannot utilize two models. It'll either be the no ticket sales model or the live event fee model. So if we're reducing those numbers down by even 50%, it still is up to the promoter. They could charge higher ticket sales also, because they have to recoup their losses. So we do expect it to have an impact, I would say in the 50% range and lower. As we move up to capacities of 75 or 100%, then it's a moot issue. But absolutely, I would expect that we could probably have up to a 25% reduction in gate fees. So having that reserve there is important. Yes, sir. Chief Assistant Jeff Mullen would also like to add to your question, sir, if we can.
I'd like to add to that. Also, there'll be some of the promoters that would say be promoted at T-Mobile that holds roughly 20,000 people. They could move to a larger arena like Allegiant, and having an Allegiant even at 35% or 50% of the population in there, they would be able to bring a large amount, close to what they have in T-Mobile, if they adjusted which venue they chose.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much, Senator. Ms. Monroe Moreno, did you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I have a question about the new administrative position. On slide 11 of your presentation, you indicated that this position was part of your long-term strategic succession plan, but you also discussed in the presentation the overtime that you're experiencing with the pandemic. So could you just let us know a little bit more about what would the impact be of the agency's overtime expenditures if this position is approved?
Sorry, I'm caught up. Sorry about that. Thank you so much for your question. So in the slide, it said it will not have an immediate impact on the overtime. And unfortunately, we would have to delay the actual recruitment process. As we presented in the slides, we are currently also, in addition to the pandemic protocols and the increased events, we are in the middle of launching our new modernization system, which we have to overhaul all of our process data migration. So it's actually taking a toll on the staff as it is. So even though we might be able to use some of the administrative, non-specific event tasks help right now, we would still have to train them. So as stated, there is going to be no reduction of impact during the pandemic, because we wouldn't be looking at a recruitment probably until we're closer into normal event numbers and the live gate fee model. And we just wanted to make a point that we feel that 8 full-time employees is probably our best model, and we could utilize contract workers, temporary workers to fill those busy times. But again, we're looking at the strategic long-term in the length of time it takes to really train someone on specific event tasks, especially the health and safety tasks with medical clearances. So there would not be an upfront reduction because we would be taking that person, that individual, if approved, to events. So you have two people now doing the same job, which would increase some overtime. But over the long term, once they're trained up, there would be approximately 15 to 25% in the administrative side of it. May I just add one more point? And Mr. Mullen, I believe, has a point to make too. Once the people are trained up, as we have the turnover in staff, we are not committing that we would maintain 9 full-time employees to the future, into the future bienniums, but we need to get through 23, 24, 25, as our staff starts retiring, we need to make sure that we have a fully trained up staff in place ready to go. So for future budget requests, we may reduce that position down. So we'd really like you to ask that you look at this as more as a transition period. And we are being upfront that for a time of during that training, there would actually be probably a spike, but not to the degree that you're seeing during the pandemic protocols. And I think Mr. Mullen has one thing he'd like to add to.
Thank you. I was just going to stress that 3 of our staff members, between the 3 of them, have 75 years of seniority. So with all the great knowledge that they have through their years of experience, when we lose one of them, what hopefully is no time soon, to retirement, that creates a big bubble, a big vacuum there. And so we need to have someone on staff being trained to fill in, to learn all this vast knowledge they've accumulated over the 75 years that they have together. Thank you.
Thank you. And you hinted to it in the answer for the last question, but the new modernization system that was approved in the 2017 legislature and the contract, I believe it expires May of 2021. Are you on track with the modernization project? Can you just give us just a little bit of an update? And are there any other enhancements that this replacement system will address in your agency's workload that you haven't already mentioned?
And Ms. Monroe Moreno, I had actually cut them off when they got to that item, so I'd like them to be able to go ahead and walk us through that very briefly, and then we'll go ahead and get that question answered, but I had cut them off for a second. Perfect. And we'll move on to the next one. So if you would go ahead and continue on the next item and get those questions answered. Thank you.
Budget enhancement request E226, instant replay technology. The Nevada State Athletic Commission is the first state ever to attempt utilization of instant replay in the sport of boxing. Nevada State Athletic Commission has invested time and research to create policy and procedures for the use of instant replay. As a starting point to test the process, NSAC is using very low-tech grade equipment. However, we will continue to research the technology available and how to develop a system independent of the on-site TV networks due to a lack of consistency in cable, et cetera, between them. We are still in the developmental phase and will continue to fine-tune our processes. Technology continues to advance in leaps and bounds. In order to continue to draw combat sports to Nevada, we must stay current. Our research to date has shown that one of the lowest price options on the market is in the range of $9,000 to $10,000. To quote Daniel Hamilton, commentary of Sport Broadcast Journal, instant replay continues to evolve as sport's most important technology, from accuracy to good TV viewing, getting the call right. Madam Chair, do you have questions on E226?
Well, why don't we go ahead and just finish? You've just got a couple more pages in your presentation. Let's go ahead and finish, and then we'll ask the other questions. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Austin.
I'm sorry, there it goes.
You went, okay, got it, never mind. I think you skipped one.
Budget enhancement requests. E227 officials training. Seeking budget line for quarterly or biannual office training fee would cover facility rentals and any training materials. NSAC in Las Vegas is recognized throughout the world as a preeminent city for unarmed combat sporting events. These events generate millions of dollars for the state and local businesses, which means officials must minimize mistakes or risk loss of revenue if promoters don't feel like the right calls were made. NSAC strives to provide the gold standard for the sport of unarmed combat. Proposed $2,500 total for FY22, FY23. E228 regulation review. NSAC is in the process of reviewing its statutes and regulations for possible amendments. This work is expected to fall in the FY22, FY23 period, which would incur LCB review costs. The estimated cost is based off previous review, one-time cost $4,500. E229 Verizon Jetpack. Require 2 additional jetpacks, which are hotspots for event use. We often have multiple events in the same day with 2 staff members attending each event. If requests are approved, that would bring the total to 4, matching the number of Surface Pro tablets required to run our events effectively and efficiently. Annual costs increase $960 plus one-time equipment purchase of $199. E710, E720, and E721 are standard replacement schedule and addition enhancements. This next slide, we're included to add a brief snapshot in some context to the agency. Las Vegas is an incredible platform to host unarmed combat events. However, the Athletic Commission must deliver at every level from bout approval to medical clearance, staff ensuring they do not miss an adverse test that would have serious implications for health and safety. The same thing goes for the referee. They must be vigilant in the ring, knowing when to stop a fight. There's also a financial outcome for the combatant and the gaming public if the judges and or referee get the call wrong. The budget enhancement requests are part of our current needs and strategic succession plan progress in order to continue successfully fulfilling our mandate. Unarmed combat sport provides a positive economic impact, not only for the state, but local businesses as well. We take the job of regulating unarmed combat seriously, and the health and safety of the combatants, along with all licensees and the public, is part of every consideration we make. The work done and decisions made prior to an event are the most important part of the process, specifically in the area of health and safety. This ties back to the need of fully trained staff and a successful knowledge and skill transfer. We wanted to give you a high-level overview of the event process. Of course, each square is only a heading and has a list of tasks and reporting beneath it. As with any event planning, there are a lot of moving parts. As noted throughout this presentation, we often have 2 events scheduled on the same day. Each of these tasks are duplicated per event. This concludes our slide portion of the presentation. Before we turn it over to the committee for questions, we would like to thank the committee for their time and thoughtful review. We'd also like to thank the LCB staff and committee manager for their assistance in guiding us through the meeting process. Thank you for your time and consideration.
And thank you very much. So if we could go ahead and go back to Ms. Monroe Moreno's question about the budget enhancement. I believe it was on the modernization. And it's my understanding that this wasn't actually included in the governor's budget. This is outside of the budget request. Is that correct?
Proposed order. Okay. I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Yes, did you hear me?
Okay.
Sorry.
Yes, we can hear you now. Sorry. So the modernization project was not finished in the original year and it was rolled forward. So it is in the budget for
Right.
expenditures. I believe that there was just a question around the process, if that is correct.
Right, and that one, and then I believe, and then we'll go to 226. So we'll be instant replay separately from the modernization. So let's talk about the modernization first.
Okay, so the modernization program is separate than anything that we've presented today. That was already approved. To answer committee's question, you are correct. The contract is set to expire at the end of May at 2021. To give you an update, we are in the middle of a soft launch. It has been a very long and drawn out difficult process. The vendor also was awarded several other contracts for the state, specifically for board and licensing. We don't fit the mold at all. So there has been a lot of extra work and development for our agency, specifically for the number of medical requirements and clearances. So our project tended to get pushed all the way to the end, but we have very, very clearly let the vendor know that we will not be giving them an extension. So they understand that the final push to go to a full live launch. We have done our soft launch. We're working out the kinks. We're connected with CyberSource. We're collecting funds. The second piece that they have to finish by the May expiration is the event piece, and that will help eliminate a lot of the tasks and streamline the time it takes to prepare event, because it'll be populating all of these required forms. So they are in the last push for that, May 2021, and no extension. And of course, we will not be paying out until everything is up and running, the holdbacks, et cetera. So I hope that answers your question. It will help modernize a lot of our systems, yes.
Thank you. Ms. Monroe Moreno, did you have any follow-up on that, or did that answer your question?
That answered my question, Madam Chair. Thank you.
You're welcome. So if we could go to 226, the instant replay.
Madam Chair, this is Senator Dennis.
Oh, Senator Dennis, go ahead.
Sorry, I wasn't going to ask a question, but something just came up in that last answer. With the new modernization system, who's going to provide the support for that? I mean, considering you're having a hard time getting up and running, who's going to maintain? Is it going to be in-house staff, or are you going to be using the vendor to provide that support?
So the vendor does provide the support. The actual making our unique systems work into the program has been part of some of the delays, and again, the awarding of several contracts at the same time. But they will support the maintenance side of it. And then the Treasurer's Office with CyberSource has been amazing, and we are working closely with all those parties, and any issues or glitches we've had, both of them have also been working together. So we are confident with, of course, the Treasurer's Office, the CyberSource team, and our vendor. Once they have completed the project and it's up running, we are confident that it will be a well-rounded system.
Yeah, I mean, that would be my concern, is if you've had such a hard time getting up and running, whether they will provide timely updates and service when you do that. So that's why I wanted to bring that question up.
And we do appreciate that, sir. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Welcome, Senator Dennis. So as far as E226 goes, the budget enhancement request, this was not included in the budget. This is outside of the budget. Did I read that correctly?
We did submit it for budget consideration as part of the enhancement, yes. It is an addition. It's not part of our base, correct?
But it wasn't included. You're asking for it outside. It was submitted, but it wasn't included?
My understanding with our budget team that it was submitted, but yes, it would be outside.
Okay, all right. Just wanted to make sure that we had everything on the record on that. So this is, okay, we'll have to have further discussions on that. So with that, committee members, are there any other questions for the State Athletic Commission?
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes, Senator Brooks.
So it's on this item you were just talking about. So the instant replay of this is, and you're saying it's outside of the budget and you've made a request. I don't think we have a dollar amount associated with that. Is there a amount of money associated with the instant replay request that you submitted, or is that still something you're working on? Because I believe we do not with that.
Senator Brooks, in the slide, it does state it's $10,000, and that was what we submitted to our budget team as the initial request, and that was based off research that entry-level programs off the shelf that universities, colleges use, the entry level is $10,000. Now, that may not work perfectly for us, but we felt that that was a good starting point, specifically that we have really entered in at a very low-tech grade. But to move it forward, we thought that the 10,000 entry-level system would be a good start. We're sure that we would have to tweak it and make some exceptions to what they have to fit our needs. But 10,000 was included with the enhancement request, sir.
Okay, thank you. I think that you might get a follow-up question from the fiscal staff to kind of clarify that. I think there's
absolutely, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Brooks.
And thank you, Senator. I am going to go to Ms. Kaufman. If she could just kind of clarify what we're talking about here, as somehow we get twisted around. So, Ms. Kaufman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to clarify that the budgets are created so that you have base enhancements and you have decision units for all of the various enhancements that are being recommended as provided by the governor. It does not appear that the E226 decision unit was provided in the executive budget, and as such was not a recommendation of the governor.
Thank you, Ms. Kaufman. Are there other questions from committee members? Mr. Hafen, did you have a question on this, or was that another topic? Well, I'm not getting a response from Mr. Hafen. So any other questions from any other committee members at this time? Hearing none. Thank you very much to our presenters. We appreciate it. And I believe there will be a couple of follow-up questions. So we'll be working with staff and we'll move forward from there. Thank you very much. Good luck. Be safe, and especially thank your staff for everything that they have had to go through the last year. It's been a rough year on everybody, but you've managed to pull off some events and get some things done. And I just want to make sure that everybody stays safe. So thank you guys very much. We appreciate it.
Madam Chair and committee, we thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Goodbye.
So with that, committee members, I believe we can go ahead and go to our next budget today, which is the Western Interstate Commission on Higher Education, the WICHE budget. I believe we have Ms. Ollett, our director.
Good morning, Ms. Carlton, Madam Chair, and good morning to you members of the committees. My name is Jennifer Ollett. I am the director of Nevada WICHE. And I have a brief presentation for you that I am going to attempt to pull up right now. Is everyone able to see that?
Yes, we do have it. Thank you very much.
Perfect. So I wanted to start out and give you a little definition. Sometimes due to our name, there can be some confusion. What you see on this slide is WICHE, the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education. They are actually a nonprofit organization based out of Boulder, Colorado. They started the compact between what is now 15 states and 2 territories back in 1954. And originally the purpose of the compact was that Western states were not quite as settled as we are now and didn't have the resources in each state for each state to have a school and a specialty. So what the WICHE program did was create a way for us to share students between schools and not create our own resources in our states when we didn't have the population to justify that. And as time has grown on, some of those problems have not really been needed anymore as states have grown and created their own resources. But WICHE is still a very valued part of higher education, and it also provides several other initiatives, including the Legislative Advisory Committee, which a few of you are members of. And there is a policy and research arm, so kind of a think tank where they do analyses and provide information for your benefit and anyone else in the West. They also have several key initiatives that Nevada participates in. The Interstate Passport is a great new program that has been especially relevant during COVID, where people can transfer their general education credits between community colleges. Again, other programs that they have. And at the very bottom, you see the tuition savings program, and there's a couple different ones at the undergraduate level, the graduate level, and then the professional student exchange program. And that is primarily where Nevada, or at least this office that you're hearing from today, is dealing with when it comes to WICHE. And then lastly, selects 3 commissioners. We have our executive commissioner, I believe, on the phone with us today for any questions. His name is Fred Locken, and he is a political science professor at Truckee Meadows Community College. So if you would like to hear from him, he is here. And the next screen is our office, and this is what we do. So because of the name confusion, I think a lot of people tend to think we are the same organization, and we are not. The Nevada office pays dues to the larger WICHE organization in Colorado. We also fund a portion of the Nevada Psychology Internship that is an initiative through the Division of Public and Behavioral Health and WICHE in Colorado. We do provide funding for students through that professional student exchange program, which is, again, a tuition savings program. And then we have our health profession education program of Nevada, which you may formally know, for those of you who have been around for a while, as the healthcare access program. And we went through some strategic planning sessions over the last year. And we don't actually provide healthcare access to anyone. We provide access to healthcare education. So we decided to just change that name so it was a little easier for individuals browsing our programs to understand what they were signing up for. And this doesn't require any changes in statute or anything. I think it was just a more simple way to refer to what we do. And here you can see our program revenues for fiscal year 2020 to 2023. And you'll see, or for all the upcoming biennium, excluding the fiscal year 2021 with the budget reductions. And our budget is relatively flat, as you can see. We have a small reduction budget, or budget reduction in our expenditures. Oh, sorry. We have a small budget reduction right here in our HPEP program of $30,000. That's decision unit E680. And we were able to take the bulk of our 12% budget reductions that were requested for our agency out of our administration budget. So we're really glad to not being taking away money from students who really need this funding. This is more just something of interest for the committee. We have actually been in existence since 1959, and in that time, we've served quite a bit of students. You can see the different fields that we have supported over time. We have sent a lot of students through dental school and law school, and as UNLV opened up those programs, we exited those fields and do not support those anymore. And then here at the end, you will see some fields that we are still supporting. When you look at how we're supporting our fields in terms of where our funding is going by the field that we're supporting, this is our data from fiscal year 2020, which is the last year where we had a full expenditure portfolio. And when we did this on our own, I think we were all a little surprised to see that veterinary medicine was taking up 39% of our funding. It's a very popular program for students. It's a very expensive program for the state. And it's also a very long program. So every time we fund one new student, they're in school for 4 years. So we'll be making that $32,000 commitment over a 4-year period. So the commission went through, and we just wanted to present some basic information before we get to the change that we're going to make in terms of the fields that we fund, which is to provide you some information you may not have seen before about the fields that we support and the students that we're supporting, what schools they're going to, where they're coming from. So you can see here, and I won't do this for every slide, but for occupational therapy, it's a 3-year program. We end up spending about $37,000 per student throughout the entirety of their program. The Nevada alternatives that exist are UNLV, which just opened, and Toro. And then these are the 5 students we support and the different counties that they come from. And we have one of these slides for your information for all of the fields we support, which is physical therapy, physician assistant. And you'll notice a lot of our students are going to Toro University, and Roseman University is also in Southern Nevada. So that does help us with our retention rate, as 86% of our students are returning to Nevada. And I think that's because a lot of them are actually not leaving Nevada. They're going to study at Toro and Roseman. So that is something that helps us. And here we have veterinary medicine and the different schools that we support for there. Social work, right now we're just funding UNLV and UNR. And last year, because of our Balance Forward, we were able to fund 7 extra students, and all individuals who are funded through social work are individuals who are already working in really excellent organizations like communities and schools. They're working directly in school districts. They could be working for DCFS, other nonprofit entities. We're really trying to support them in those types of initiatives. This is our nursing information, and you'll notice that UNR has a disproportionate share of our students here, and that is simply because UNR has some extra tracks in psychiatric mental health and gerontology acute care, and also gerontology primary care. And those programs, I believe, are in the works for UNLV, but they're not open yet. So I imagine this slide will change over time, but right now it is more heavily leaning towards UNR. Again, this is our fiscal year 20 actual expenditures by fields, just to remind you of where we kind of are in terms of vet med, nursing, and then the other fields. So what we did is we wanted to look at workforce data to see if we were making the right investments in fields. And this program has always worked at the intersection of workforce development, economic development, and then also trying to match our students to the area of most need. And so you'll see in this table, this statewide table, and this information is fairly recent and came from the Governor's Office of Economic Development. A location quotient, just in case you're not familiar, but very briefly, if a location quotient is equal to 1, that means that we're about the same as the national average. So 1 is an excellent place to be. Above 1 is better because then we have more professionals than the national average. And a location quotient less than 1 is not where we would like to be. And I don't think it's any surprise to the committee that our healthcare sector is not close to 1. And what you will see here is the rows that are highlighted in that orange color are the fields that we currently support. And then the rows in gray are fields that we used to support and we no longer support. So during the 2015 legislative session, there was an active decision to stop funding the field of optometry because we had determined based on workforce data that we were sufficiently supplied with optometrists and that funding could be better used elsewhere. So this is for Northern Nevada. There's some slight differences between North and South, but nothing very alarming. I think maybe the biggest difference that I saw when going to Southern Nevada is physician assistants and nurse practitioners. And nurse practitioners are graduate level nurse practitioners, so they can function on their own. They're able to prescribe their own medicine without the supervision of a doctor, and they can also train other registered nurses below them to help them give clinical hours and help them move up if they're in programs to do so. So what we really see here is those location quotients for Southern Nevada and those two areas are really low. And we started this strategic planning session before the pandemic. And as the pandemic came through and took over all of our lives, we really felt like continuing to make more of a direct investment in these fields would be supportive of what we were seeing as a need all around us every day, which is that we need more people on the front lines to help us with this terrible public health crisis that we're going through. And so you will see that while we don't actually have a decision unit associated with this, we did readjust our slot matrix so that we would be more heavily funding physician assistants and nurses, which are the fields that we are the most desperate shortages, and also that have been on the front lines of the pandemic. And we are also phasing out the field of veterinary medicine. So this chart represents fiscal year 2023. These 4 students right here would be our last veterinary medicine students. We would not have any in the following years. Right now, we're not taking any applications for new veterinary medicine students. And that just really goes back to the workforce data that we were looking at, which shows that overall, we're not looking too bad. 0.95 statewide is almost 1, so that's right at the national average. Northern Nevada has an oversupply, and then Southern Nevada is not quite at 1. And I know there's been some concerns in past legislative sessions about the need to get veterinarians in rural areas. And we absolutely considered that before making this decision. And we consulted with WICHE, and we were told that we cannot dictate where these individuals go when they return. We can tell them to come back to Nevada. That is part of how the program works. And when we give you funding, we expect you to come back. But we cannot tell you where in the state to go. So without that ability, we didn't really see in continuing to invest in veterinary medicine as the best use of our dollars during this time. And some other states have come up with creative innovations to support veterinary medicine outside of this PSEP program. The state of Utah actually has a program where they teach their vet med students in-house at the University of Utah for the first 2 years, and then they help subsidize their funding for the next 2 years at Colorado State. There is another state that does things a little bit differently in terms of it's more about funding. Your veterinary medicine school is very expensive, so they give you low interest rate loans to help you make it through. So there's different ways that we can try and support that field going forward. We didn't have the time as we were preparing to really flesh that out and figure out how we can, but we would like to in the future. We just don't see this PSEP model as being the best investment for limited dollars right now. And that is our program budget. Would you like me to finish the administration budget before we go to questions?
Yes, let's just go ahead and get it all done, and then they're all tied together, so then we'll ask our individual questions. Thank you.
Perfect. So this is our administration budget, which is very small. Some of you will remember the governor has recommended a transfer of our office from the governor's office to the Nevada System of Higher Education office. And some of you will remember we were, in fact, there between 2009 and 2015. So this might be a little surprising. This state, so we were looking at other PSEP states for multiple reasons. But what we were looking at in this specific one was to figure out where other programs were located, how they were structured, how they were staffed before we went about seeking this recommendation. And as you can see in this chart, out of every state that we surveyed, there is only one state that is not included in a system of higher education, and that is ours. We are within the governor's office, and every other state is within a system of higher education. There's good reason for that. It's just natural opportunities to leverage resources. Something else I would put here for the committee's attention is that we are overstaffed compared to our other state partners. And I believe that has everything to do with this individual right here, which is our loan component. We're the only state who, when we give our funding away, we ask for an employment commitment, and we also ask for you to pay back some of the funding that you gave us. And the only other state that asks for you to pay things back is Alaska, but they don't ask you to come back home after you're done studying. They just give you the funding and expect you to pay all of it back. So we are sort of an anomaly in that our program is tracking where people are employed and if they're fulfilling their obligations. And we're also serving as a loan and collection agency. And I believe that is why we have so much staff time spent on this PSEP program. In looking at other states, I believe that someday our program could look more like Hawaii in terms of the number of people that we support, 47 students. There is a return requirement, so continuing to track that and monitor that, make sure people are coming home. The number of fields that we fund is the same. I guess it is my hope that someday, as we kind of work on what's going on here, that we could look like Hawaii, which would be a benefit even without the weather. The benefits associated with the transfer to ENHE, again, we've already talked about, we're the only Western state in the 17-member compact who operates outside of higher ed. And right now we are working with the governor's office, or we share space with the governor's office, and we are able to, or I am able to, utilize the director of OSIT and really work with him about strategy and things of that nature, personnel. He has been an invaluable partner for us. But at that office, we don't have the ability to share administrative support. So, and due to the pandemic, this office has been operating with one person, which is me. And that has turned me into a lot of different hats. I'm wearing a lot of different hats, everything from a receptionist to the director before you know, and many things in between. So bringing us back to ENHANCEMENT would really allow us to share resources. We'd be able to utilize student workers inside of ENHANCEMENT. That's a infrastructure that is already set up. Community partnerships, we regularly work with people at ENHANCEMENT. I had a project recently where we were working on how to fill our nursing slots, and I needed to connect with about 12 different people throughout ENHANCEMENT. And the way that I was able to do that was former Chancellor Riley was a commissioner of ours. So he was able to make introductions for us and facilitate that process. But as part of ENHANCEMENT, I believe that's something that we could do on our own. And then lastly, program innovation, although I haven't been going in that order, is right now, because of the disconnect between where WICHE is situated, we're not benefiting from the information that we could by co-locating with ENHANCEMENT, and ENHANCEMENT is not benefiting from our information with our connection to WICHE. So it's just, it's an avenue that could be explored. And very last is that it would also come at a general fund savings of $85,000 over the biennium. And then our last item is that as part of the requested budget reductions, we are keeping our accountant technician position vacant. Right now, the position is a 1 FTE and it is completely vacant and has been for a year. And this would restore 0.4 FTE of the position over the upcoming biennium, which would be a huge help. Then we also have a decision unit for computer equipment replacement. I'm not sure if that's something you would like to talk about, but I have that information if you would. Then lastly, we have a BDR coming through, which would eliminate the 25% loan component that comes with our funding and structure the entire amount that we give our students as a stipend contingent upon fulfilling the employment commitment. It would also take, right now we have all of our penalty amounts, our interest rates, and the terms of our payback are all set in statute. So as interest rates change and markets fluctuate, we don't have the ability to change that without getting a bill draft request. So we would like to, the BDR in question moves all of those items into regulation so that we can go through a formal process to have those updated on a more regular basis. Our statute is literally 60 years old. So that would be very helpful. And that is it. I'm ready for questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Olet. We have some new members of the committee that have a couple of just general type questions. So I'd like to go to them first, and then we'll dive into a couple of the other questions. So Ms. Peters, you had a question?
I do. Thank you, Chair. I am looking at your tables regarding our location quotients and particularly related to our mental health services. And I'm wondering why those are not included in the supported services under WICHE, whether it's because we already have those existing in the state, those programs existing in the state, or if they just haven't been elevated in priority.
So we do support the field of social work, which I think For this, I included it as therapists all other, but there's other categories it could hit. And we also fund part of a psychology consortium with the Division of Public and Behavioral Health. That is definitely something that we could and would like to prioritize. First, I guess we just need to free up some of the funding in the other fields so that we are able to do that.
This is probably answered in one of your slides, but I'm going to ask it anyways for clarification, if I may, Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So as we move away from supporting maybe veterinary medicine, does that free up some of these dollars, or are those already allocated to programs that have been kind of fleshed out and approved at this point by the...
So the way that we structured it when the commission went through the budget was to take the savings from the decrease in veterinary medicine and apply that to programs such as nursing and physician assistants. I think there is always an appetite to increase the funding towards social work. Social work is actually one of our fields where last year we got 50 very qualified applications, and they are very eager for funding, and they're already working in the industries where we want them to work in after they finish school. So I think that is definitely on the table for right now. We wanted to tackle where our biggest expenditures were going, and that was vet med. And due to the sheer size of that investment, 39% of our funding going to vet one field, that is what allows us to free up and make different decisions going forward.
Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Peters. So Ms. Lillard, I think we need to clarify something. So when I was looking at some of your pie charts where some of the students are actually going to school, when we make the agreement with the student actually gets to choose where they go. Isn't that correct? And then commits to coming back to the state, but we don't guide them to one institution or the other. They get to choose which institution. Is that correct?
Absolutely. They are, for both programs, they are either about to enroll or they are already enrolled in the institution of their choice.
So it's where they've been accepted, and the whole goal is that we help them pay for their education so that we grow our own here in the state.
Yes, exactly. It's sort of like a carrot to keep them here and in their, I don't know if you want to say formative years, but research does show that the first couple of years of work experience that they have, that's one of the times where they may intend to stay in that area. They may have families. They may do things that makes it harder for them to leave.
And this is one of the components that we always have the conversation about when we get into graduate medical education. I know right now there's an issue bubbling up with rotations, that it's hard to get rotations. And without rotations, we can't keep them in the state. So this is a multifaceted way of trying. There's a lot of moving pieces to keep healthcare professionals in the state. So I appreciate you making that clear. I think Ms. Howdigi had a couple of questions, please.
I do, Madam Chair. Thank you so much. And I just want to start with the move from being general fund to under NSHE. So is it what she's, I guess, what is the goal? Is it just to move it under NSHE for funding purposes, or are you expecting to be under the authority and regulation of NSHE and the Board of Regents?
So we're already funded with general fund for our administration budget. It's 100% general funded, and that would not change when moving to NSHE. And we also have our own statute, our own chapter, NRS 397 in Nevada revised statute that we are required to follow. So that wouldn't change. For us, it would be more that we would be able to share knowledge and share resources in an office that could, right now we're working with one person. So there would be 29 other individuals that we could connect with on different initiatives. It's more about partnership. It wouldn't affect funding.
Gotcha. Okay, so you're going to remain an independent commission. Okay.
Yeah.
And then my last question, Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. It was regarding the accountant technician, and you touched on it a little bit. You mentioned that it would be a big help, but could you just walk us through what kind of impact it would have?
Sure. So right now, again, we do have a full-time accountant technician position, but that person has not been in the role since she left at the end of January of last year. So while a 0.6 reduction sounds large, it would be a big help right now. And probably, quite frankly, just to start with how behind I am in certain administrative duties, we would probably use some of those funds for student workers to kind of get us caught up and get all the work that I've been doing to clean up our files, which I believe some of you may know, we just recently went through an audit and have been really working hard to clean up the situation that we were in. And so this help would be more administrative in nature at first, at least for the first year. But again, like I said, any help would be wonderful. So I'm not sure if I answered your question completely, but we are excited about the ability to have some additional help.
No, it did. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Ms. Haudegui. I believe Senator Gokachi had a question.
Madam Chair, and of course, I'm concerned about the change in the VetMed program. I was just curious, is there any way, truly, I agree with the numbers, and it shows that the support we've given veterinary medicine over the years has been working, but there still is a significant shortage in food animal vets, especially in the rurals. And I'm sitting here looking at the ones I know that are retiring or getting close to it. Dr. Spratling, Dr. Wallstrom, Dr. Sanders. There's no vet in Tonopah or Central Nevada. So I'm concerned. I really hate to see the program completely go away. Is there any way we could really look at the food animal side rather than the small animal and the equine vet practice, which is typically centered in more urban areas? And is there any way we can, figure out some way to support, i.e. the food animal vet side, that track, which is really what we're short in rural Nevada. Huge industry. I know already we've got vets coming out of California, out of Idaho, servicing northern Nevada. And I'm afraid what we're going to do is just export some of our more qualified young people that are qualified to go into vet medicine, and they're going to end up going to, like you say, Utah State. I went there myself. A new program they have is very good, where they do the 2 and the 2, either in Oregon or with Washington and Utah State. So very concerned about that. I'm afraid if we can cut it completely off, it's going to be detrimental. We really struggled since you've been in place to get those food animal vets in the system. We've got a few of them. And of course, by disclosure, my son was Witchy. I've been through this whole program, as well as sitting on the Witchy Vet Med board. Thank you. Just, is there any way we can change the trend a little bit, get the food animal vets back?
I completely understand, and I knew I was going to be hearing from you, Senator Gokachi. I was waiting. I really wish we could, and this is what I was trying to allude to in different ways that we can support it going forward, and maybe that's a conversation that we could have outside of this hearing. But from what I was told by Witchy is that we cannot force anyone we're supporting in the PSEP to specialize in a field that we want them to. So we give them funding, and the only thing that we can ask is for them to come back to Nevada. We can't tell them where in Nevada, and we can't tell them how. We can't say, well, we really need people to help with the food supply, because they won't let us do it. And you are in the unique position on the VMAC. It would be great if you could maybe voice those concerns, because I think that's a shortcoming personally of the PSEP, that they aren't able to do those things. But again, we don't want to leave the field. We just don't want to continue to invest in small animal veterinarians. We're not getting the people that we need in the places that we need, and we have absolutely no way to make them come back.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair, and maybe this is something we can work on, because I'm afraid it's going to, again, create a shortage in some arenas. And of course, we all know that medicine is extremely expensive. That's why, again, we don't have a vet school in the state of Nevada. Thank you.
And thank you, Senator. But as we heard, it sounds like it's something that's out of our control. That's more of a structural change that we don't really have an impact on. So making those decisions based on what our criteria and the outline of how the program has to work, just as we can't tell them where to go to school, we can't tell them what to take either. So that's the give and take of the program. So I guess one of the questions I want to have is about the loan component. That is something that we've done, and it was changed. And now we're seeing a bill to change it. So it seems as though kind of got the cart before the horse a little bit on this one. So if you could expand on that.
Sure.
It is a component, and the board voted to do something that I'm not sure they have permission to do.
The loan component for the PSEP program, the 25% loan component that we were, or that I was mentioning going through the presentation, that is set in statute. So we did not eliminate that loan component. We do not have the power to eliminate that loan component. There is a BDR request to do so, but that has not been eliminated. What was eliminated was the 10% loan component that is associated with our underserved program, so the health profession education program. And so the way that works is that portion, that loan component portion, was something that the commission added in 2007, and it is not in statute. There is no requirement to do that. So as there was no requirement to do that, the commission removed it, just as the commission in 2007 added it.
There's been a lot of inconsistencies with this program over the years. I know it's changed location and jurisdiction numerous times, and
Yes.
It's always been a very hotly debated item. So thank you for clarifying that. I just want to make sure that I understood that. And so the discussion point behind removing that, the rationale behind removing it, was it basically so that we would get more folks to go into that field?
Actually, okay, so if I could give you an example, I think this might help you. The loan component, or our health profession education program, which is the loan component that we eliminated, the 10%. So if I am a social work student, I'm going to be awarded $5,000 through our program, $5,000. And $4,500 of that is a grant if I work in Nevada in a medically underserved area and I fulfill that obligation. And then $500 of that is a loan that I have to pay back. And looking at those small amounts through the health profession education program, we spend $5,000 on social work and then $7,700 per nursing student. Frankly, it doesn't generate a lot of revenue, and it creates a very large administrative burden for something that doesn't generate a lot of revenue. And it was decided that it didn't make sense to do it that way, especially when the employment commitment that we are asking of them is greater than it is in the other program. For the PSEP program, it's just come back to Nevada, work anywhere you want. But for our HPEP program, it's come to Nevada and work in these very specified areas.
All right, thank you. I appreciate the example. I think that makes it fairly clear. I believe I have Dr. Titus for a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to ask a question, and thank you for the presentation. I am one of the members of the Legislative Advisory Council for the WICHE program, and I think that it's incredibly important for Nevadans. When I was in medical school, we had folks from out of state at our medical school from Alaska and other states, Idaho. That didn't happen. So it works for many states, both directions. My question is really regarding the veterinarian program, and to tag along a little bit of what Senator Okachia asked. And I know that you gave us information on what your decision and how you made your decision to eliminate the program. And you did say that you're going to currently, the ones that have received that program, you're going to finish supporting them through their finishing of their graduation. But the data that you showed from Southern Nevada, Northern Nevada, or all of the state, where we don't maybe need more vets, do you have a breakdown? And it would be helpful get that to us because we do know that there is a shortage in rural Nevada. And I think it would be nice for us to see what that component is and how short, where do we stand on a national average in rural Nevada? Because your comment about not having folks go back to a rural area because it's not whatever your policy is, I'd like to maybe have some more visit offline and some further information on how do we make that part of the requirement. We know that various programs that we support in the state mandate or they get reimbursed if they go back to a rural area, whatever the healthcare policy is. We know that students in like the PA program, I know that the PA that came to my office to help me while I was here in this building was reimbursed through a program because they came back to rural Nevada. So what is preventing, what are the hurdles we'd have to do to change the policy, mandate that students go to either in underserved areas? Because the whole healthcare, I'm not just talking about veterinarian students, but I'm talking about all of these students that we educate. Make sure they go back to whether a medically underserved area, whether it's urban or rural, and so have those kind of requirements. And I think that would be one of the hurdles that we should be able to get over to for all of these programs to make sure these students, regardless of what they're being educated in, need to go back to an area of need. And I know we do that for other programs. So do you have any idea about what it would take for us to mandate that with the WICHE program?
No, I'm really glad you asked that, actually. So what it would unfortunately take is to not invest in the PSEP program. That PSEP program is managed by WICHE in Colorado. They set the rules. They set the terms. We participate in that program, but we don't have any say other than to say how many students we want to fund and what fields we want to fund in. If we were to shift those fields outside of the PSEP and put them into our health profession education program, that's a program that we run. That's a program where we could say, we're telling you where to go. We're telling you how much we're going to give you. We select the applicants. It's a very different process. It is something that the commission is very interested in. It was not approved for consideration during this biennium, but it is something that the commission would like to do.
Great, thank you for that answer, and certainly would like some follow-up with that and some other thoughts on that. Because again, it's not just about veterinarians, it's about the whole continuum of all these professions that we educate and making sure they get back the area of where they're needed. So thank you for that. Like to have further discussion on that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Committee members, other questions at this time on these particular items? I'm not seeing anyone reaching out through any of the different ways that they have. So I believe we've addressed all the questions and concerns. And thank you, committee. Really good questions. It's a good thing to learn about. So thank you. So
thank you, Chair Carlton.
I believe we're good. Did you have anyone else that had wanted to participate in this discussion, or were they just all a phone a friend sort of thing?
Brad, would you like to say anything? I think he's good.
Okay. All right. That sounds great. We appreciate you getting through it and walking us through the whole thing. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Olet. So I believe our next item on our agenda is the Department of Indigent Defense. So if we could go ahead and queue up the appropriate person. Let me find my documents. There we go. Do we have our executive director available?
Yes, Chair Carlton. My name is Marcy Reba, and I'm here on behalf of the Department of Indigent Defense Services. I was appointed by Governor Sisolak in 2019 to this position. Part of my duties also are to serve as the Secretary of the Board of Indigent Defense Services. With me today are Jason Colnut, our Management Analyst, and Jared Hickman, a Deputy Director, if there are any questions in their areas of expertise. And with that, I'd ask permission to share my PowerPoint.
Please proceed.
We have been asked to appear today to present the budget for Budget Account 1008. The Nevada Department of Indigent Defense Services actually has two budget accounts, Budget Account 1008, which we're here for today, as well as Budget Account 1499, which is for the Nevada State Public Defender. In order to understand the mission of our department, it's important to look at the law that created us. The Department of Indigent Defense Services was created by AB 81 in 2019. Our legislative authority is set forth in NRS 180 as well as NRS 260. Some language from the AB 81 preamble states that under the 6th and 14th Amendments to the Constitution, the obligation to provide effective representation to accused indigent persons rests with the states. It's the obligation of the legislature to provide the general framework and resources necessary for the provision of indigent defense services in this state. And the state remains ultimately responsible for ensuring that such indigent defense services are properly funded and carried out. The legislature must ensure that adequate public funding is made available so that indigent defense services are provided by qualified and competent counsel in a manner that is fair and consistent throughout the state. Which takes us to the 6th Amendment of the United States Constitution, which does say that in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the assistance of counsel for defense. And this does apply to the states through the 14th Amendment. Which brings us to our mission. The Nevada Department of Indigent Defense Services provides support to counties to develop and maintain quality, cost-effective indigent defense systems that meet the needs of the local communities and the requirements of the Constitution and state law. The Department of Indigent Defense Services is currently staffed by 7 individuals that you see here. Although this department is small, it is very mighty, and it is very excited to take on this challenge that we have before us. The duties of the Department of Indigent Defense Service are set forth in NRS 180.400, and to highlight a few, we must review indigent defense in rural counties, provide training and resources to indigent defense providers in the rural counties and all counties, assist counties with regulation compliance from the Board of Indigent Defense Services, collect data, compile the data in an annual report, and audit, investigate, and review indigent defense services in the counties at the board direction. NRS 180.300 does create a board within the Department of Indigent Defense Services. The board consists of 13 voting members who are reflected in this slide. Our chair is Professor Ann Traum, who's a professor at the UNLV Boyd School of Law. Our vice chair is Dave Mendiola, the Humboldt County Manager. The board also has several duties which are set forth in NRS 180.320. The board must establish regulations, develop uniform procedures for mandatory data collection, require attorneys to track time and provide reports, develop standards for indigent defense, develop a maximum contribution formula to determine the maximum amount that a county should pay for indigent defense services, and our department must request the additional from the state. And we must also work with Boyd School of Law. Another point that we must touch upon is pending litigation in the area of indigent defense. And this is a case called Davis v. Nevada. In October of 2018, the plaintiffs, who are represented by the ACLU, as well as O'Melveny and Meyer, challenged the constitutionality of Nevada's practices regarding indigent defense systems in Nevada's rural counties. Now, just to pause for a moment, Nevada's rural counties, as they defined it, is limited to 10 counties. These counties are Churchill, Douglas, Esmeralda, Eureka, Lander, Lincoln, Lyon, Mineral, Nye, and White Pine. Basically, what's reflected in this rural counties is counties that choose to provide indigent defense services by contracting with attorneys rather than forming the organized offices. The counties that have an organized public defender's office were not included in that definition. On June 3rd of 2019, the Nevada Legislature passed Assembly Bill 81, establishing the Department of Indigent Defense Services. On June 14th of 2019, the plaintiff's motion for class certification was granted. On April 30th of 2020, our department came before the Interim Finance Committee to request 4 items, and these expenditures were approved and allowed the department to accelerate the implementation of AB 81. Those expenditures will be discussed in more detail further in this slide show. And on August 11th, a stipulated consent judgment was filed. The Davis stipulated consent judgment does provide certain obligations that the state must comply with, and the department has been selected by the state and by the parties to implement these obligations. Obligations with a deadline of February 2021 are to collect data, establish a standard contract, approve new county contracts for indigent defense providers in the rural counties, ensure immediate access to applications for indigent defense services, ensure screening for indigency within 48 hours. So basically that means that individuals that are arrested should be given those applications for a public defender immediately, and their eligibility should be screened within 48 hours. And also counsel at first appearances. So the first time that they see a judge, they should have counsel standing by them. Deadlines of August 2021, issue client surveys and incorporate that feedback into our review. Execute a weighted caseload study contract. And after completion of that weighted caseload study, within 6 months, we are to add those caseload standards into contracts. And within 12 months, we're to require that counties comply with those caseload standards. We also have several continuing duties. We must establish minimum standards for client communication, attorney qualifications, provide training and resources, performance guidelines, systematic review, and enforcement if necessary through corrective action. This brings us to our first budget amendment, G08. We are requesting $75,000 per year to pay for the Davis court-appointed monitor. The monitor's duties are to facilitate the successful implementation of this consent judgment, which I just discussed, assess whether the defendants, the state, are complying with the terms of this consent judgment, and advise the court on any compliance issues. The monitor cost is not to exceed $75,000 per year, absent an agreement by the parties or by the court approval for additional work, and it must be paid in a timely manner at the defendant's expense. As we said, I also wanted to follow up on the contingency funding. The Interim Finance Committee did accelerate the implementation of AB 81 by approving funding in 4 areas last April. The first is a weighted caseload study. We partnered with the National Center for State Courts, and we are ahead of the deadline on this one to perform a weighted caseload study. That weighted caseload study is in process as we speak, and they are in the final week of gathering data for timekeeping. We expect that the final report, the draft report, should be sometime early June, and the final report will be completed by the end of June. The second is that our department has partnered with LegalServer. You've heard that the board has to create uniform timekeeping requirements. And this is a software that allows for uniform timekeeping and tracking and the creation of reports that our department is in the process of building. We expect in April to roll this out to all indigent defense providers in the rural counties so that they can use it as a case management system. And this system will allow us to monitor case workload standards, as well as ensure that they are keeping time as required in the regulations. Third, we partnered with Sobel Solutions. He is a data analysis and he helped with the survey creation. We are in the process of creating the survey and expect to roll it out when we roll out LegalServer. Fourth, the Interim Finance Committee did approve additional funds for training. As you're aware, this is a continuing duty. We had requested funding to do an in-person training, but due to the pandemic, we were not allowed to do it in person. We did transfer that to a virtual conference, which will be scheduled for April 22nd and April 23rd. All indigent defense providers throughout the state, including Clark County and Washoe County, are invited to attend that. And we will be providing a training with the preeminent expert on cross-examination on day 2 of that training. In addition, we have been providing monthly training free of charge for these indigent defense providers. Now, our main target group is those public defenders in an organized office or the attorneys that are in contracts to provide public defender services in these rural counties. And that amounts to about 42 attorneys in the rurals. This year, we've averaged 23 individuals at each of our trainings that we've provided. As directed by the legislature in NRS 180.320, the Board of Indigent Defense Services recently adopted temporary regulations. They were adopted on January 28th, 2021, and the anticipated effective date will be March 5th of 2021. Contained within these regulations are, in sections 18 through 21, the formula for determining the maximum amount that a county may be required to pay for indigent defense services. In sections 22 through 29, a discussion of plans for provision of indigent defense services and what must be included in them. Sections 30 through 39, attorney qualifications, training, and education requirements. Section 40 outlines the audit, investigation, and review process. And sections 41 through 47 discuss contract terms and discuss uniform data collection requirements. Future goals of our department are to develop plans with counties. Now that we have the temporary regulations coming to effect on March 5th, we hope to reach out to all of the rural counties and assist them in the development of their plans. With that development, we'll also estimate the cost of implementation while we work the plans out with them, continue our courtroom observation, continue our our monthly training, and we'd like to create an annual in-person training. Now, the goal here is we'd like to get everyone together because it builds community, camaraderie, and it really connects the urban and the rural defenders. We've been able to do this virtually, but we haven't been able to do it because of the pandemic in person. We hope to further develop our SOAR program, which is Support, Outreach, and Assistant Resource. This is a resource that we are providing to indigent defense attorneys. If they have a question, they can write into us, and we will connect them with attorneys or law students that are willing to assist them in research of that area. We want to continue working with the UNLV Boyd School of Law. We've recently reached out to try and develop an extern program with them. So we'd like to continue to work with them. We have hopes to build a complex litigation unit within the Nevada State Public Defenders Unit. And this would be pursuant to the recommendation of the Supreme Court in ADKT 411, which does recommend that the state public defender should handle all death penalty and appeal cases if the rural counties would like to opt into that service. We'd like to continue to develop resources for attorneys, and ultimately our full goal is to achieve full compliance with Davis in a timely manner. This takes us to our budget enhancement, E225. This restores funding to previously approved in-state and commission travel to our fiscal year 21 amounts. It also provides additional funding for our training budget to bring our training budget to $3,166 per year. Here is contact information on how to get a hold of us if you'd like to get a hold of us. And we would like to conclude by saying a big thank you to this committee for letting us explain the mission of our department, and we are available for any questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I guess the overarching question basically is going to be, where are we with the consent judgment, and how close are we to fulfilling our obligations?
As I pointed out in my slideshow, the consent judgment has some deadlines which are due for February of 2021. We are collecting data and we will be rolling out Legal Server. At the last board meeting, we worked to establish a standard contract, and we will be reaching out to counties to approve their new county contracts. We have made a regulation to ensure immediate access to applications for indigent defense services and ensure screening for indigency within 48 hours and counsel at first appearances. The one big issue, though, is that these are regulations which are required, and when we reach out to the counties to ask them how they intend to do that, we do expect that this is going to increase the cost for counties over what they've provided for indigent defense services previously. So in preparation for that, we had requested funding, an item for special consideration, E227, which would have been an enhancement based upon our maximum contribution formula. The E227 request is based upon having the counties fill out a financial reporting form where they set out all of their indigent defense costs, such as payment for public defenders, contract attorneys, experts, investigators, equipment costs, travel, training reimbursement, construction, supplies, and other costs. We took what they certified as their expenses for fiscal year 18 and 19. We applied our maximum contribution formula to that. And then we asked them what they expected to spend in fiscal year 21. Based on the application of our maximum contribution formula, in the item for special consideration, which did not move forward, E227, we had requested approximately $4.8 million per year, and that is for all of the counties. If you limit this to the rural counties, and that's specifically counties with a population less than 100,000, the cost would have been $1.8 million. And if you further limit it to the definition of rural counties as it's set forth in the Davis Agreement, that amount would be $1.1 million for them to be able to implement these new requirements as set forth in Davis.
Is this all in conjunction with the funding formula that was encapsulated in the regulations?
Yes, Section 18 of our regulations does have a funding formula. So we asked them to let us know what their maximum contribution or their contributions for fiscal year 18 and 19 were. We took the average of that. We asked them what they expected to pay, and anything over and above their average of fiscal year 18 and 19 under the board's maximum contribution formula would be something we'd request for the state to assist in this indigent defense reform.
So if the counties don't put it in their budget, then the state has to pick it up.
The counties are expected to continue funding indigent defense up to the maximum contribution formula, which would be the amount that they spent, the average of fiscal year 18 and 19. Anything over and above that, any costs estimated in their plans, our department is to request that fund in our budget build or go to IFC to request those funds.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we had all of that on the record. I do have some folks with questions. Let me go here. I believe I have Senator Ganser. And you're on mute, Senator.
Thought I hit it. Okay, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Please proceed.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I had a question about training. I believe you said that on average you've had 23 people attend the training. Is the training required at the county levels? And do you offer continuing ed units for the training?
And I have asked my Deputy Director, Jared Hickman, to handle any questions regarding training, so I will turn the screen to him.
Thank you for the question, Senator Ganser. In response to that, our regulations require a minimum of 5 continuing legal education credits applicable to indigent defense services, and provides further guidance on what that should be. So that is the requirement. And yes, we are providing those continuing legal education credits right now in a monthly format. And as Director Reba indicated, we have our first conference. It's a 1.5-day conference in April where those CLE credits will be provided.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, I believe I can go to Mr. Hafen. When I recognized you earlier, this is the one that you really had a question on. So if you'd like to go ahead now.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And you did address the number of the questions that I had, and so I appreciate putting that on the record. Director Reba, can you touch on the number of wrongful convictions and how much that's actually cost our state?
Thank you, Assemblyman Hafen. I don't have exact information on the number of wrongful convictions. I am aware, though, that recently a case came before the Interim Finance Committee for payment of $990,000 for a wrongful conviction, but I don't actually have those numbers for you.
Thank you. And just for clarification, was that paid by the state or by the county?
Thank you. That amount was paid by the state, by the Interim Finance Committee Contingency Fund.
Thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair.
With that, I believe I have Mr. Watts next.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. And please excuse me in advance if this has to do more with the other budget within the department, but I recall that the Department of Indigent Defense Services will also be assisting with capital cases in the rural counties. And so I was wondering, it's maybe for this budget, it's more related to training, but I was just wondering if you could give a little bit more information on the cost associated with capital cases handled within these counties, and how that is or isn't incorporated into this budget.
Thank you, Assemblyman Watts, for that question. There's 2 places where any funding regarding death penalty cases could lie. The first is in that item for special consideration, E227, which is that enhancement that we discussed for the maximum contribution. When we asked counties how much they expected to pay, we asked them to let us know or to consider any sort of death penalty cases that could be included. So when counties were reporting what they expected to pay for that next year, that would have been included in that maximum contribution. But as we said earlier, that item for special consideration did not move forward, so we do not have any funds in that area to assist. The other area, you are correct, would be with the Nevada State Public Defender Budget Account 1499. We had requested an item for special consideration, which was E228, and this was based upon 80 KT 411 from the Nevada Supreme Court, which recommended that all death penalty and appellate cases should be handled by the Nevada State Public Defender if the counties would like to opt into that. So we wanted to try and open that up as an opportunity for the counties, and that's actually included in our maximum contribution formula to allow them to opt in. But we needed funding to be able to build this complex litigation unit is what we were calling it. So with E228, we requested funding to allow rural counties to opt into representation by the Nevada State Public Defender for death penalty and appeals. The cost for the first fiscal year would be $559,962, and the second fiscal year would be $707,058. And the main focus of this is also based upon Davis, where Davis does require counsel at first appearances. And when we're reaching out to the counties, if they have a pending death penalty cases, one of their hardest questions to ask is who's going to cover this case? A lot of the rural counties don't necessarily have someone that they can go to immediately, but the goal with the complex litigation unit is that the Nevada State Public Defender, if we had such a case as this, could be immediately available to appear for that initial appearance or soon thereafter would be the goal. But that also did not move forward.
Thank you. So both of the budgetary items that would be related to death penalty cases in these rural communities did not move forward. That's correct. Is that correct?
That is correct. We have no funding to assist the counties in these areas.
Thank you for that clarification, and thank you for the question, Madam Chair.
Okay, Mr. Watts. So with that, committee members, do we have other questions on Department of Indigent Defense? I don't believe I do. I'm not seeing anyone.
Madam Chair.
Senator Gokachia.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I just need a clarification on that, following up on what Assemblyman Watts said. So in those scenarios where you did have a capital murder case, and that cost a small rural county millions of dollars they wouldn't have in their budget. I mean, how are they going to cover that? Just write a red check?
Thank you, Senator. So I believe that the goal is to create that complex, this is Marcy Riva for the record, and the goal is to create that complex litigation unit so that Lincoln County knows who to call, or White Pine County, or whatever county it is if they have this. So what I gave you for the numbers, the 559,000, that's basically for the staff. Any expert witness fees would hopefully already be included in that maximum contribution formula. But yes, this is something that it may be expensive, but we're hoping to provide some sort of relief for the rural counties that if a case like this did come up, that we are applying what the Supreme Court had recommended so many years ago and creating this option for the rural counties that they could opt into the Nevada State Public Defender so they knew who to turn to.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So ultimately, the decision lies with the county whether they want to pursue the death penalty also. So that would be a component in this decision-making process.
Marcy Riva, for the record, it is up to the prosecutor whether or not they want to pursue a case as a death penalty case. The expenses for prosecuting a death penalty case are far less than it is to defend a death penalty case. So we are requesting to have sufficient funding in the maximum contribution formula if this situation does arise, as well as we were requesting that item for special consideration so that we could have staff to cover it to assist the rural counties if this situation does arise.
Okay. Thank you. Committee members, are there any other questions on this particular item? Not seeing or hearing anyone else that wishes to be recognized, I believe we are done with this item. Thank you very much for your presentation and answering all of our questions. If there's any follow-up, we'll be reaching out to you to get those taken care of, okay?
Thank you so much for the time. I know that our chair, Professor Antrom, is available for public comment. I don't know if you'd like to hear from her at this time or it's the conclusion of the meeting, but she is available as well.
Okay, we'll be closing out this budget item and then we will be opening it up to public comment. So that will work there. So committee members, with that, we'll go ahead and close this budget item. And this was our last budget for this morning. We will go ahead and open up for public comment. And we'll give them just a moment. It's 10:02. We'll give them a couple of moments to switch over to public comment and we'll go from there. So everyone just be at ease for a moment. Broadcast Services, do we have anyone on the line for public comment?
Chair Carlton, this is Michael from Broadcast. We do have 2 callers on the line. I can queue up the first one for you now.
Please go ahead. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 819. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi there, my name is Nikki Levy, Nikkilevy. I'm a staff attorney at the ACLU of Nevada. I'm testifying on behalf of the certified plaintiff class in Davis versus Nevada. We are asking that Nevada fulfill its constitutional, statutory, and judicially enforceable obligations to adequately fund indigent defense in the rural counties. Since the passage of AB 81, the plaintiff class in Davis has entered into a judicially enforceable consent judgment with the state to settle our litigation. The terms of the consent judgment and the regulations promulgated by the department require the rural counties to meet certain minimum standards in providing indigent defense. Without sufficient resources, the rural counties will fall below those standards. The executive director's funding request is immediately necessary for the counties to meet actual cost increases associated with attorneys, experts in investigations, travel, supplies, and other expenditures related to the representation of indigent defendants. We urge you to remedy this budget shortfall. Failing to do so will expose the state to violating the terms of the Davis consent judgment. Noncompliance with the judgment could result in significant fiscal consequences for the state that far outweigh the cost of adequate funding. If the state violates its obligations under the judgment, plaintiffs are entitled to seek enforcement in court, and if the state materially breaches any of its obligations, the court can award plaintiffs' counsel the attorney's fees and costs associated with enforcing the consent judgment. Plaintiffs have incurred at least $2.85 million in reasonable attorney's fees and costs just leading up to the settlement. If the settlement unravels and plaintiffs do not receive necessary relief, counsel has estimated that litigating such a case through discovery and trial would cost in excess of $10 million. Simply stated, if the department and the rural counties are unable to fulfill their respective duties because of insufficient state funding, our clients will suffer. We will return to court to enforce the terms of the consent judgment, and the state will expose itself to being ordered to pay our costs. We believe Nevada's money would be better spent on ensuring that its criminal legal system is constitutional, and we hope that you agree. Thank you so much.
Next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 959. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning. My name is Anne Traum, A-N-N-E, T-R-A-U-M. I'm a law professor at UNLV William S. Boyd School of Law, and I chair the Board of Indigent Defense Services. And I just wanted to highlight 3 points that were touched upon by Executive Director Reba in her testimony, and also just briefly mentioned by the ACLU in their comment. First, our board, like the department itself, was created by AB 81, which recognized that indigent defense is the responsibility of Nevada, the state, not its counties. The consent judgment in Davis reinforces this foundational principle. It doesn't create it, but it does make it legally enforceable, which is one reason why the funding today that we're urging the committee to support is so critical. The board is required under Davis to implement the terms of the Davis consent judgment, which governs those 10 rural counties, as mentioned by Executive Director Reba. And the centerpiece of the consent judgment and the department's work is this maximum contribution formula, which is why we keep talking about the $1.1 million that was originally requested, but did not move forward in the budget request. That $1.1 million obviously is the absolute minimum because it covers those 10 rural counties. The full amount would be $1.18 million for all of the rural counties and $4.8 million. So we're really urging the committee to at least adopt that base level in order to comply with Davis. And as the ACLU just mentioned, that's so critical because it's part of the Davis consent judgment, and failing to fund it will most definitely land Nevada back in court and prove much more costly, litigating a losing battle and paying attorney's fees, which will far exceed the $1.1 million that we're urging the committee to fund. So with that, I thank the committee for their support, for giving the department time to explain their mission and the funding that they need for this very, very critical part of what the state does in Nevada for indigent defense, and also to support the rural counties in fulfilling their support of indigent defense. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other callers?
Chair Carlton, there are no more callers at this time. The line is open and working.
Okay. Thank you very much, Broadcast Services, for all your help and support in getting us through these meetings. We appreciate it. Thank you, committee, this morning for your time and attention. I believe that completes our task for this morning. Everyone have a great day. We are adjourned.